Quick gut check for you. Keep it to yourself or throw it in the comments. What's the one light you'd leave on forever if you had to? Picture this. A farmhouse at the end of a rutted lane, every window glowing like the house is trying to keep the night out by force. It's 1906. A family who sleeps with lights on has 3 rules written above the bed. Don't turn it off, don't split up, don't say names in the dark. Then a thunderhead rolled in, the line drops, and the power dies. A child runs before anyone can catch her. Glass cracks. Someone takes a fuse from the box. 52 minutes from now, you'll know exactly who pulled that fuse. In the last 5, you'll read the final warning the last survivor left. 4 words carved into a doorframe the night she decided to leave the lights on forever. Part 1. The house that refused darkness. Houses keep habits. This one kept its fear in the wiring. The day I walked through the Everlys place, the caretaker's key stuck in the lock as if even the door was reluctant to open without light. The porch boards were silvered with years and heels and the slow grind of winters. On the wall beside the door, a nail with a little tin shade hung on it, empty. In the glass of the front window, my face looked back like a stranger. And in that old kind of glass, the world curves, sky too big, trees too near. Somebody had taped a burnt-out bulb to the frame with string long ago, a spare that failed too. Inside, the first thing was brightness. Not actual light, those days were gone, but the memory of it. Every room had 3 fixtures, as if a single bulb was untrustworthy. On the mantel, a cardboard carton of frosted bulbs with penciled numbers on their paper sleeves. In the hallway, a switch plate rubbed bright by anxious fingers. And above the kitchen door, painted neatly in a careful hand, 3 rules. No dark by choice. 1 room together. Call each other by the daytime names only. Below the rules, the paint had chipped away in a crescent where people had touched the wall like a talisman. I put my backpack on the kitchen table because that's what you do when a house invites you to set something down. The table had a scar where a hot pot lived a minute too long and left its outline as a reminder that heat is loyal to nobody. The stove sat like an old animal that won't get up anymore. There was a ledger on the table, half under a folded oilcloth. The ledger was cloth-bound, brown, cracked along the spine, the kind of book that drank everything it experienced and grew heavy with it. On the first page, the title, written with more intent than style, The Hour in the Wall. Underneath, a name that made my throat stop for a moment. Me. There were 4 M.E.s in this house if you go by the family Bible upstairs. May Everly, who used to be May Park before she married the man with the dynamo. Merritt Everly, the father who could build anything, and guessed wrong only once, when guessing speed mattered. Merritt's daughter, Martha Elaine, who died in 1943 and left a note nobody wanted to read, and the one who would outlive all of them, Ruth Marie, who signed her diaries M.E. because it was safer than R.M. in a town that liked to turn initials into gossip. The first entry, June 23rd, 1905. We do not turn the lights off to sleep. We have decided. Jonas ran into the door in his dream when the lamp was cold. I do not sleep with him crying like that. We put up another lamp in the hall. Merritt will put the generator nearer the house so the belt does not slip in storms. The power man says, "We are strange." He sleeps with a candle under his hat if that keeps his wife from waking, I say. It's not the kind of book you expect to lay out their life this way. It's not a poetry thing. It's a napkin list expanded. A recipe card rewritten every night with the day's measurements. Me wrote about keeping children from corners, about pinning quilts over windows to stop drafts that talk like people, about buying bulbs by the dozen because they burned out faster than you'd think when they never got to rest. She wrote the way mothers write when they don't have time to write, and they write anyway because writing is the one place where rules stay put. The Everlys came to this town with the idea that light could be a solution, not a commodity. The mill downriver bought a dynamo in 1902 to run their belts and offered a line to the houses on the hill for $5 a month. Merritt, who worked with his hands and his pride, built his own generator in a shed the children called the humming room. He ran wire into the house, wrapped every knob with cloth and hope, and told the kids the truth. This is not a toy. This is the part of the day we borrow from the sun. There are families who keep their superstitions on the shelf next to the salt. The Everlys put theirs on the wall where you couldn't ignore it. May had night terrors as a child, waking at the edge of her bed, screaming at a corner nobody else could see, one foot already in the air as if stepping toward a door that wasn't there. Her mother had them before her, though nobody called them that then. They called it taken. Her grandmother had them too and wore to sleep, a necklace of clacking blue beads she was certain deflected the worst of it. May had learned early to anchor herself to a light, candle, window, even the luminous dial of a clock, so that when the invisible voice said, "Come," the visible thing told her, "Stay." Jonas got the same trait, and Clara, and then later Ruth. In the ledger, nights have names like Battles, the Tumble Night, Stair Sunday, the Cotton Hush, the time when Jonas walked straight into the open hutch and cracked his eyebrow because somebody had turned the hall lamp down to save filament. The morning when Clara woke with a splinter in her bare heel and didn't remember leaving the bed, and the smeared line of red on the floorboards showed the path her heel took to the kitchen and back. If you've ever had sleep paralysis, you know that the body can go to war with itself in the dark. 100 years after these pages, a viral video would crowd my recommendations with a title that felt like a cousin to this story. The Hat Man. The Shadow People. It didn't live in 1905, but it lives now. People sitting up at 3 a.m., recording their faces, whispering about the figure at the end of the bed with the brim of a hat and shoulders like a door. Watching that, I kept thinking of May's sentence on page 6. Do not look at the doorway. It will take shape if you do. It made me want to put a hand on her shoulder across the century and say, "You are not crazy. Your brain is borrowing fear from your body and putting it in the only place it has room." They had help. An electrician named Lyle came twice a month to check what Merritt had wired. He didn't like what he saw and said so. Too many outlets, not enough breaks, cloth insulation that would cook the wall if a wire got the wrong idea. He charged less than he should because he liked the way Ruth sang to herself while he worked, and because the Everlys let him talk and did not pretend to understand more than they did. He installed a fuse panel, labeled it in tidy pencil. Kitchen, hall and stairs, bedrooms, parlor, generator. He put a box of porcelain screw-in fuses on the shelf and wrote a rule that joined the other three. Keep spares near. In the hum room, he told Merritt to set the belt tension right, not too tight, not loose, to put oil where oil was meant, and nowhere else, to stand back when he pulled the flywheel because that wheel had killed a man in the mill and would do the same in a shed if it got the chance. He told him to teach the children not to come near without a hand on their wrist. He told them the truth that most men then did not. Electricity is a miracle and a problem. You act like it's both, and you will live. The stories that fill the ledger from that first year feel like practice for what they didn't know was coming. Night 1. The lamp in the girls' room burned black spots into the shade where a moth got too close. Morning, May cleaned the soot. In the margin, the shadow on the shade looked like a man at the foot of the bed for a minute, and I almost woke Merritt to make it go. Afternoon, she wrote by the window until she could look at the lamp again without thinking it had a face. Tense circles of detail. The stash of matches in the bread tin, because if you tell yourself you won't need them, that's when you'll need them. The tin soldier with a bent rifle that inexplicably calms Jonas when he wakes with the impression that there's someone in the doorway. The 3 pebbles May puts in Ruth's pocket to weigh her down and sleep like luck. The way the cat, Braid, prefers the bed where the light is strongest and yowls if someone draws the shade. They weren't strange. They were practical. If fear was a weather system, they learned where to move under it. Downstairs in a drawer by the sink, next to the bulb sleeves and the strings and a broken clockworks, I found a folded paper, greasy on the edges, the way paper gets when it keeps company with kitchens. It was a power company notice, December 1905, winter interruptions of service possible, lines crowded, storms can down poles. Under that, in pencil, May had written, "We will not be in the dark. We will take turns at the belt." And then their initials in a column, M.E., Maine, C.E., J.E.R.E., a family schedule for not letting the house go black. The town had an opinion. It always does. The storekeeper shrugged when I asked in the present tense what folks thought back then of a family who kept their lights burning while the mill whistle slept. "We have people who leave their porch light on all night right now," he said. "Back then, they didn't have the luxury of thinking about neighbors' eyes. But you still hear it in the old-timers' voices. Everlys were peculiar, scared of the dark. But then you hear the rest. Had their reasons. Some families do." He went back to bagging nails and whistling a tune I didn't recognize. In a cardboard box at the County Historical Room, under church programs and war bonds, I found a letter to the editor from 1906. A man named Abel Fitch, friendly with the pen and unfriendly with the lamp, wrote, "It is a waste to burn the night away like that. Makes mocking of all our wives' care with the coal. Our eyes will forget how to work. What child sleeps properly in such glare? Darkness is a temperance we should teach." Below the letter, in ink a shade darker, the editor had replied, "Spare us your sermon, Fitch. We print this only because it's shorter than the last one." All families build a religion around what they fear. The Everlys' religion had nothing to do with pews. It was rules and wire and the insistence that if a house is bright, the things that come in the dark can't find you. And like all religions, it was just a little bit right and just a little bit wrong. Behind the house, the hum room smelled like oil and wood and the metal that remembers heat. The belt hung loose across 2 pulleys like a cat draped across a windowsill. The dynamo had a plate on it stamped with a name that felt like a joke now, Edison. Someone had etched a line into the metal above the flywheel. "Don't touch without your head on. It made me smile and feel sick, both. There was a crate in the corner labeled with a pencil stub that had no eraser left to its name. Fuses. Good. And below it another, fuses, spent. I lifted a spent one to the light out of habit. The filament inside was nicked and pulled and had the tiny notch of a thing that did its job once and then stopped. At the bottom of the crate, there was one that wasn't spent because it had never been used. Its ceramic was smooth like a worrystone. On the rim, under the grime, someone had cut a little cross mark. I put it back in the crate and told myself, I'll remember that. You will too. At the end of my first day in that house, I took the ledger upstairs and sat at the end of the hall where the family had nailed a hook for a lamp that no longer existed. The light through the window was spare and honest and made the dust look like a swarm of primitive life. I read the entry for the night they called the first failure. June 12, 1906. 2 lines. The line died at past. We were not ready. Then a second entry, below, in a hand that shook just enough to catch the light. Jonas ran. He saw what I used to see. He said for years afterward. He did not. He saw it. He ran into the door and out it, and the night did not give him back easily. On the next page, the lines run longer, thinner, as if the pen was thirstier. We took turns at the belt. Merritt pulled and swore, and the flywheel came round once only, then stopped with a sound I can still hear when I walk by that room with the door closed. Lyle came in the morning and said, I will bring you a better one. He did. It was too late for that night. That night we learned why we must be brave in practice, not only in talk. It was still daylight when I left, but I turned on the light in the hall anyway. Habit learned fast. That night in the rooming house above the bar, I watched Nexpo's The Hat Man. The shadow people again. The way you watch an old movie, you know won't save anyone. But it makes the air in your room quiet. He plays those stories like a bell. Mother sees a man in a brimmed hat at the foot of the bed. He doesn't move. She can't move. Next morning she laughs because what else can she do? I thought of May telling herself, don't give it shape. Don't hand it your fear with a face. And then I remembered the fuse with the little cross etched into it like a memory left by a person who wanted to find it again in the dark. Part 2. The night the lights thought about leaving, storms in 1906 wrote their signatures in nail heads. The Everlys roof had a pattern to it like a hymn. Rows and rows and row upon row of hammered iron that rang a little when rain recited. Clouds built themselves on the lip of the ridge and waited the way a cat waits until the right movement, and then they pounced. Men on porches put their boots up and said things like, we needed it, while the wire sagged and the lamps thought about flickering. June had been generous and then vengeful. Crops came up, and then tried to lie down all at once. The first night the power died, it wasn't a tantrum. It was a shrug. The line hissed, a sound only children hear, and then nothing. Lamps dimmed. The house exhaled. The way houses do when they realize nobody is holding their breath for them anymore. May's ledger records it with the precision of a person who needs words to stand between her and the thing they describe. 10:30. A sound like bees. The candle we never used sat in its dish, and I thought, not that, not this house. The generator belt hung, and I thought, get the belt. I said to Merritt, we will take turns at it, the way we planned. He said, I will take the first turn and the last. Jonas was 10 and too brave. He had learned that bravery is the glitter you put on fear to make it leave you alone. When the light went off, the dark didn't arrive. Something else did. The space between the last fraction of brightness and the first atom of shadow came alive and gave him back the old picture. A man in the doorway who wasn't a man. The brim of a hat that was actually the corner of a cabinet. The coat hung on a chair that was a body if you gave it the favor of your panic. I saw him, he said later, and for years after he denied he said it. In the ledger, May wrote without judging him. He saw him. He did what I did when I was a girl. He ran toward where he thought his fear was not. He ran into the door and through it, and the night wrote his name on its hand and said, "I will keep you a moment." Clara came awake already moving because some children are built like that. She was a year older, brave only when someone else needed it. She went to the hall and put her hands on the wallpaper to prove that walls don't move. At the stairs, the night breathed up at her from below like the heat from a cellar. She said a name out of habit, "Mama," and then 2 seconds later corrected herself. "Marie," because the rules said, use daytime names. The dark saves your real ones. It sounds foolish out loud in a town where people sleep without curtains. It is not foolish if you have ever been a person who hears your own mockery and the voice in your head. Merritt went to the hum room the way a man goes to the horse when he needs to get out of town fast. He pulled the belt hard with both hands while his fear had a conversation with physics. It came on for a moment, 1 lamp's worth, a gnat of light, then died. He had oiled it wrong 3 days before. Or he had oiled it right, and the heat had been unkind, or he had done everything exactly as Lyle had taught him, and the belt decided to be a belt, not a miracle. In the kitchen, May struck a match and hated herself for it while it lit, because this was a house that promised her hands would never have to make fire again. The match was a liar. It burned with the wrong color, and it frightened the little ones because all lights in their house had a bulb's honesty, not the mood and flicker of a candle. She held the candle under the oven to warm it slightly the way her mother had taught her when she was small, then set it in the dish on the table, and blew and called Clara and Ruth and told them to look at her. Not at the door, not at the light, at her. Look at me, now. They did. In the ledger, the lines thin at the center of the page. I tell them how we count when scared, and it keeps the mind steady. Count 10. Breathe between. Say out loud where you are. I am in the kitchen. I am in the kitchen. I am in the kitchen. I do not leave the kitchen. I am in the kitchen. I call Clara by her daytime name again because I do not like the way my mouth wants to say her other one, the one I call when the lamp is lit and the night is small. From the hum room, a noise like a cough. Merritt did not swear this time. He said a boy's name that was not Jonas. He said his own brother's name. The one who had died in the mine and who, if you believe such things, came and put a hand on the flywheel and said, "Not this, not tonight." In the dark, the belt scratched his knuckles, and the taste of iron reminded him why men drink when they fail. He did not drink. He walked back into the house and told the truth. It will not come back tonight. Lyle came at 11 because his house was now used to the pattern of the Everlys nights. A lamp blink in the distance, a tightness in the air like weather building under a roof. He ran instead of walking because he knew that there are hours when walking is a sin. He wrapped his coat around the children and told them his mother's story about the dog who stayed by the fire and kept the wolves from thinking they could come in. His voice warmed the kitchen in a way light couldn't that night. Outside, the town, which had learned to sleep without ritual, rolled over and went on. In some rooms, men sat up because they'd read about electricity killing people in Chicago and they decided they didn't trust it here. In others, women woke and listened because the air had changed its mind about how it touched their throats. One house over, Abel Fitch sat up to write another letter and then, with no light, reluctantly kept it in his head for morning. At the frame of the kitchen door, a child's handprint in soot. It wasn't there before the match. It would be there forever after. The first failure cost them only sleep. The second didn't come for a month, and if you've ever been a person who thought you were spared and then learned you weren't, you know that the month is not a reprieve. It's an education. May wrote notes to herself the way a person writes notes to a person who will judge them later and be kind. Put the candle where you can find it in the dark by feel. Do not let the little ones practice fear. Make practice into a game. Turn off a lamp once when the sky is blue and teach them to stay where they are and not to go to the door even if they want to, even if they feel something on the other side, even if their mind says Mama is there. Teach them that voices in your head are not in the hall. The second failure was a story the town would tell itself wrong for 100 years. It was July and heat came down the road like a person who owed money. The line drooped and then went static. A stillness. Then the house unclenched, as if a hand had let go of its throat. The light died. The generator tried to pretend it was a heart. It wasn't. The candle was already in May's hand this time. That is not what cost them. Jonas had turned 11. The age of leverage when boys begin to ask why more often, and the world gives them worse answers than they deserve. He had decided that shadows were not so bad if you decided not to look at them. He climbed onto the sill in the hall because that was where the breeze found him and because the upstairs windows made a square that felt like a safe box you could put yourself in to be protected. He was safe there even when there was no wind because safety sometimes is just a thought repeated. Below him in the little hall at the curve of the stairs, the stand held a hat and a coat. The hat was Merritt's. The coat belonged to nobody, but lived in the house and met men at the door before they could decide if they were home. The wind put its hand into the house, one finger at a time, and the coat swayed just enough for a boy's eye to make a story out of a fact. Jonas saw what he always saw and decided he would not be a boy anymore, and he would not fear it. He ran down the hall to the stairs and took the top step like a man. There's a reason for rails. There's a reason for a hand always on them. He forgot that reason for a second. His foot met the edge of the step, and he folded the wrong way. The sound a body makes when it learns gravity intimately is not one I can put here without letting it crawl under your shirt. May wrote the word thump and then crossed it out and wrote fell because she wanted you to read it as a verb and not a sound you'd hear in your sleep. Lyle met Merritt at the bottom with the truth again. Don't move him, he said, and Merritt, a man who wanted to pick up what hurt and fix it with motion, made himself a wall instead. Jonas breathed. He said ow because that's one thing boys do right even when they are trying to be men. He did not move his legs. Behind the words, the ledger puts a space and then a prayer that is only initials. Me prayed to whatever she prayed to. The roof, maybe. The light that had become apparent in her mind and said not this, not him. But prayers are not coins you pay to change physics. The line stayed down. The men held their breath. Jonas went to sleep. He woke the next day, and his legs did not. Children and their parents have different portions of patience. That is what teaches both to live. There are two tragedies in families, the tragedy itself, and the story other people tell about it. Within a week, 3 people in town told each other that the Everlys house was broken in a moral way. That's what happens when you don't sleep like other people, someone said. And if you want to know whether I said anything in that rooming house 100 years later, I didn't. But I wanted to. The truth is simpler and uglier. Stairs are stairs, and darkness is what it is, and a boy trying not to be a boy anymore will make a choice that hurts him. And a family that has built a religion around light will spend the rest of their days counting how often the religion fails. The third failure is the one the town remembers as the night. If you come here and ask at the gas station and say the Everlys lights, the older person behind the counter will say, "You mean the night the little one ran?" They'll say it like a story they own. They do not. It belongs to May. The storm came in sideways late August. The line went down before supper and stayed down. The generator belt broke because the leather had been cut long before by someone with a grudge against machines or patience. That's the sentence I am supposed to wait to tell you until later. But I won't. It broke, not because of chance, because someone had taken a sharp blade to it. The blade lived in the shed. The hand that held it belonged to a man who had eaten supper at the Everly table more than once and who that day had decided he was owed something the house owed no one. His name was Horace Park. He was May's older brother, a man who didn't have a family of his own because families did not give him the better part of themselves, and he did not give them enough to deserve any part. He had loaned Merritt money on a rainy spring when the mud took the road and the field ate the horse. He wanted it back with interest in the only currency people don't like to admit they think in: control. He had a temper you can call by a different name, expedience, but temper's closer. He had a pocket knife he used for everything: string, apples, belt. He cut the belt and told himself the lie men always tell themselves before things break: this will teach them. The line died right on time with the cut. The house breathed out. May called to the girls. She lit the candle and held it at her shoulder because that's where the light held a face most kindly. Jonas lay on the couch because the bed upstairs had become a hill he could see but could not climb. He asked not for the light, which would have made sense, but for the soldier with the bent rifle. He wanted the small, familiar, tangible thing, the one that did not lie. Ruth, 5, ran to get it before her mother could say the word step in the tone that meant caution. The cat, who always knew more than the people she loved, put herself in front of Ruth in the hall and swished her tail like she was herding a goat. Ruth stepped over the cat because children do. At the bottom of the stairs, a man stood who looked like a hat. He did not step back when the light touched his boots from the bleed of the kitchen. He smelled like tobacco and rain. He put his hand to his mouth and said softly, "The way you say to a child when you want them to keep their steps quiet, shh." Ruth obeyed because her body had learned that shh means safety, not danger. She stepped like a woman on Sunday, careful but not slow. Horace put his hand out and then realized he had reached for a thing he could never hold with that hand again. In the ledger, May would later write the sentence that is why I know he was there. Ruth says, "Uncle, why is your knife out?" People will tell you that a 5-year-old can't remember details like that. They can, because fear carves memory like a chisel. In 1 second, 5 things happened. The cat made a sound like anger. May stepped toward the door because she knew the sound. The candle leaned and kissed the curtain's hem. The electricity in the air made a penny-like taste in Merritt's mouth, and he thought of the flywheel even though it had no relevance anymore. And Horace, stupid with panic, reached for the curtain as if he could push the flame back into the wick. The curtain climbed the string, took a breath in, and started to speak. Lyle came through the back like a knife that meant well. He pulled the curtain down, barehanded, and threw it into the sink, hand under pump, then water into flame, then cloth into steam. He turned, covering his hand because men learn too late that hands have future uses, and saw Ruth between him and the hall. He said her daytime name sharply. She stopped. That is the sentence I think saved more than one life that night. In the next 3 minutes, they found the candle's honesty and turned it into calm. They found the soldier with the bent rifle and put it in Jonas's hand. They found the belt in the hum room and found the cut. Lyle held it in the light like a snake you don't want to name and said, "This is not the mill's fault. This is a person." There are men who think they are invisible and find out otherwise the moment light turns. Horace disappeared into the storm like a man who had always planned on whether to forgive him. The next day he would say to a neighbor something about breakers tripping. Careful with modern words to hide older acts, he would swear after, the kind of swear that tries too hard. He would be believed by the people who preferred to call the Everlys foolish instead of a man's act wicked. In that 3-minute window before his disappearing act was complete, Aunt Ora, May's sister, saw his hat. She had sleep paralysis and she was small and could never tell the difference between dream and threshold when the house was wrong. The hat at the door, the brim, the body implied. What the people in that Nexpo video sketch she would have drawn without the Internet's permission. She whispered because that was what she could do. The prayer her grandmother taught her for dark things. She whispered, "Make yourself small." And the candle made the prayer for her before she could finish. This is the part where people want a martyr. The ledger gives you only work. They cleaned. They soothed. They took the belt and wrapped it in a cloth like you wrap a child who needs a nap, and they waited for morning, calling each other by the names that belonged to Son. In the morning, the coroner came because the curtain had a story and the burn on Lyle's palm had another. He wrote everything down because men with that job do. He wrote that the belt had a cut. He wrote that there was wax on the kitchen keyhole, because for the second time in 2 months, somebody had tried to keep the house from letting in help. He wrote that Aunt Ora had a place on her arm where fear had made her skin bruise before her body knew why. He wrote that the millmen were not to blame for the line, and then later crossed it out at the insistence of someone's face. The diary skips 2 days. When it comes back, the hand is smaller, more intense. There are fewer adjectives and more directions. It says, "Do not keep matches near cloth. Do not bring the belt into the kitchen. Do not stare at the door. Do not say the baby's name after midnight. Do not say any names after midnight. Names are doors. The dark has heard enough." The rest of that year, the Everlys slept the way an army does in occupied territory. One eye open, one ear tuned to a particular sound, the sizzle of a bulb giving up, and the spin of a belt behaving, the whisper of a person in sleep beginning to talk. Somebody always sat in the rocker in the hall. Sometimes it was Lyle when he had no other place to be. Sometimes it was Aunt Ora with a shawl around her shoulders and a story in her mouth that she repeated, not because the children needed to hear it, but because she did. Sometimes it was May with her hands around a mug that had things that weren't tea in it, because that was how you get 3 hours when you need them. Sometimes, and this is why I think the house liked them for as long as it did, it was Merritt, who could have insisted his day's work excused him and who didn't, and who sat quiet, hands on knees, and learned to enjoy the sound of cotton settling in children's beds. In November, the light died one more time, and this time the belt behaved. The hum room hummed. The lamp stayed honest. In the ledger, the entry is 1 word long. Practiced. The town made a sound like respect. Not aloud, not to their faces. In the store, you'd hear, "They're managing." That was not a compliment. It was acknowledgement of survival. It's a cruel thing to tell a story a century later about a family keeping their children from fear with wire and wicks and be told they were odd. The truth is simpler. They were trying not to die. Odd is the word we give people who do not ask politely for the day to be shorter when it refuses. Part 3. Generations under a smaller sky. Time stretches cities and squeezes families. The Everlys elongated and gathered. Babies came on days when the roof didn't whistle. Some lived long enough to tell stories about stairs. Some lived only long enough to be given a name and be told, "We would have liked to have you longer." If you read the ledger like a calendar of night, you missed the afternoons. They had those. They had pies with too much sugar, and a boy in a chair who learned to be the best at whittling in 3 counties, and a girl who could sing harmonies because she knew how to find a line and hold it, while the singer beside her did something that could distract. Clara grew into the kind of second-in-command mothers wish for. She held secrets gently and made beds straight in a way that favors rest. Ruth learned her letters on labels for bulbs, GE, 25, 40, 60, and then wrote all over the hems of dish towels because her mother said the people we borrow from the sun with deserve clean dishes. Jonas, whose legs never forgave him for that second failure, learned to take the house apart and put it together so that, in the dark, he could find whatever was needed with both hands behind his back. He told a story to his cousins about light that I found on a loose leaf years later, jammed into the ledger like a card nobody meant to play. "Light is just darkness acting polite," he wrote. "You have to insist on politeness." In 1928, when ice taught every line in the county whose side winter really takes, the power did not fail. The poles did. Men went out with axes because that's how you solve problems before you have trucks. And they came back with bruises where the sky fell on them. The Everlys lit every lamp because that's how you tell the weather you aren't intimidated. The oil in the hum room turned to jelly. Jonas, now a man in every way you measure a man except with a yardstick, wheeled himself into the cold, wrapped blankets around his legs and let the generator talk to him until it remembered. Men came to check on them with faces that looked like their own mirrors and left with extra lamp oil because they had run out and because the Everlys had always bought more than they needed. In the diary for that ice week, May writes a note that will matter later. The lantern in the hall went black at 1 a.m, and we were not troubled because we were all in one room. Merritt boiled water on the stove, and the stove reminded us it liked his attention. The lamp in the parlor cracked because we had too much hope and put it near the window. It left a line down the shade that looks like a letter. It is not one. That same week, what took someone was not the dark. It was a smell. A neighbor named Tom brought his little generator inside because his wife believed that if it was outside, the night could get to it, and then to their children. He believed her. The generator sat in the kitchen and ate the air and breathed back what human lungs can't use. Their son, Tin, who had never been afraid of a shadow in his life, died because the universe does not like a system where fear of one thing births a quieter one. The coroner wrote carbon monoxide, and his tears fell in the letters and changed the shape of the O. The Everlys heated soup and carried it across the field the next day, and nobody said the thing that everyone thought. That fear makes you build your own trap. In 43, war taught the town how to darken the windows on purpose. Men who mocked shades and quilts, and the Everlys' ingenuity stuck black paper over glass, and liked being told to do it because there is relief in rules that tell you your fear is noble. They made blackout curtains like the ones the Everlys had made in 1906 and did not ask for instruction because pride is a coat you do not take off even when the weather insists. Merritt put a hand on the cloth and said, "You're welcome," out loud, and no one thought he was talking to them. That winter, the town had a drill, and a warden with a whistle, and a white armband came to the Everly door like a song the family did not want to sing. "Lights out," he said through the cupped hands. "All lights out." If you have ever watched two men with power meters in their blood meet in a doorway, you know the air takes a position. Merritt looked at him and then past him at the light in the hall that had been lit through an influenza, and the summer of hornets, and the 3 nights when the belt broke and his wife didn't. He put his hand on the plate and didn't. He turned to May, who had earned the right over 40 years to make this call, and she surprised both of them by nodding and saying, in her voice that made children stop, "Turn it off." He did. He did not do it fast. In the dark that the drill brought, the house behaved itself for a full minute. Then Aunt Ora, old now and still occasionally captured by sleep that bites, stood to go to the kitchen, because that is where people go when they do not know what else to do. She misjudged the space. She reached for a thing that was not where it always is. She stepped into a place that had become air for the sake of the drill. The chair tipped. The rug folded. People who write about wars will tell you about battles. I am telling you about the way a woman's hip meets the floor. She smiled even as her mouth filled with pain, because she had outlived her terrors and would be damned if she gave one another taste. She said, "I'm fine." She was not. She died 2 weeks later of complications of a noble exercise, and the men in white armbands sent flowers like damask and wrote a nice note. We did not know. We were keeping the town alive. We are sorry the practice took what the danger did not. Ruth took over the ledger when May's hand tired for good. Ruth is where the rules become laws. She writes them thinner. She underlines less and puts more periods. She is the one who writes in the edge of the page when the Northeast went dark in '65, and America realized that machines do not care about your day. One room together. Do not move until somebody counts to 50. Say out loud what you can see that is not fear. Chair, hand, other hand. Your foot, your other foot. Ruth was the kind of woman who would never be interviewed because she did not want your questions. She wanted your attention. Her husband, Merritt Lanier. Yes, she married a man with the same first name as her father. Life enjoys these confusions. Installed his own small backup because he had learned from the Everlys through marriage. He followed the rules. He kept the generator outside. He ran the cord through the window. He taped the edges. The night the Northeast went dark, they had light. They also had 7 people who came to stand in their parlor because the commodity they had most left was not light. It was ritual. She told them where to stand, and they did. She asked them not to whisper. She put her hand on her grandson's head and smoothed the hair forward and then back and taught him how to think of something besides the sound of the house exhaling. If you look at newspaper stories from that 1965 week, you can find 2 lines in the local column that mention the Everly house without saying their name. One farmhouse up North Street stayed lit like a ship, while the rest of us learned how to go slow. The writer pretended not to admire them because in a town where daylight is virtue, you hide your envy behind phrasing. My favorite line is the last. They do not teach their fear to children. They teach them the words they need to be brave in rooms they do not like. In '77, when the city downriver had its crisis, not the kind you can solve with a belt, Ruth wrote 3 sentences. We are not New York. We are our own little panics. But we will practice just in case. She made Merritt pull the plug while the grandchildren were visiting for the weekend, told them they were having an adventure, and made them count breaths. 1 cried, One fell asleep. One decided she liked practicing and asked to do it again. That one would grow up to be the last survivor. She would build her life in a place where the light stayed on, and she would still sleep with one lamp lit because that is what her hands knew to do when the dark thought about testing the floorboards. We say generations lightly. These were lives. They made their decisions in kitchens with floors that needed sweeping and a cat that insisted on being fed at 4, no matter what the sky thought. They were only strange because we like to watch other people's rituals and tell ourselves we are more sensible. All the while, the 1906 night waited, as unexamined and as poisonous as a truth you pack at the back of a cupboard, because you are not ready to throw it away. It waited for somebody to put it in order. It waited for an apology. It waited for a fuse. Part 4. The Fuse. With the mark and the man who thought he was weather. It took me 3 days to find it, and I wasn't looking for it then. I went to the house with a ledger to put a ribbon in the place where the words turned into the shape of 1906, and the ribbon snagged on the crate of fuses. It pulled the top one up, and then the second, and then a third spilled and rolled to the corner of the hum room near the cinder block. It stopped with a click that sounded like a nail sealing a lid. It was the fuse, with the little cross etched into its edge. I picked it up the way you pick up a coin someone dropped, that you know belongs to someone who has been dead longer than your willingness to say, sir. I turned it in my hand, ceramic smooth, the metal base tarnished, the filament intact and perfect. On the metal lip just inside the edge, a notch notched again. A cross. Someone had put it there to find it in the dark. Someone had hidden it in plain sight later, embarrassed or afraid of being caught being clever. In the ledger, nobody mentions a marked fuse. In the receipts drawer, a slip from 1906 held with a pin listed 12 fuses bought for 52 cents, and no mention of extra care taken to mark one. If you are a person who believes in evidence as a road you walk, this was the road putting a sign up for me in the hedgerow. I carried the fuse to the kitchen table and opened the ledger and the receipt book and the town minutes from that year, which the caretaker had loaned me, with the care only a man in a sweater vest can muster. I put everything in a line, not because I thought the line would talk, but because sometimes paper touches paper, and the words on both learn a way to be stronger. June 11th, 1906, Town Council Minutes. Concern regarding power reliability. Suggestion made to install heavier wire on flume crossing. Referred to mill. A citizen named AF, that would be Abel Fitch, who always signed as if he were embarrassed of both names, spoke about frugal uses of light and the effect of the new habit of leaving lamps on upon moral fiber. Motion to adjourn. Seconded and carried. June 12th. Ledger first failure. June 13th, Y. Lyle's receipt for belt. Signed, belt installed. July 29th, ledger. Second failure, Jonas Falls. August 24th. Ledger third failure, Curtin, Horace. The morning after the third failure, a telegram in the telegraph office recorded what the operator had to say to a man 2 towns over. Everlys belt cut. Horace a suspect, he said not /L. The L was Larkin's signature. He kept messages now because the town learned what paper could do. It's rare to see an operator editorialize. It's rarer to see a town admit what it knows about a man who married the sister of a woman who cooks better than anyone. I took the fuse to the church because the church is a place where the sound of the town still lives in the wood. I set it on the pew where May would have put it if she'd had the leisure to make symbols into shrines. I said out loud to the dust and the wood and the air, "Who put this mark here?" The air did not pretend to answer. it just breathed. The sheriff's log for the year has a page of notes that ought to have been thrown away and weren't. On August 26, it says, spoke with HP about line outage and fuse stock. HP reports he has kept spares for ME since spring, says she is forgetful. She is not. He is, or is lying. Advised HP that generator work is not for casual hands. He said, I have been casual my whole life, and it has worked fine. Advised to leave. He did not. In a box, next to the receipts, was a small envelope with two edges worn like a locket. It held a piece of paper that said in May's hand, not as a ledger entry, but as a letter left on purpose, and left where indicating a letter on purpose was important. If I am not in this house when somebody else is, and the lights go, and there is a choice between the parlor fuse and the hall is the one. There is a cross on it. Do not pull the one that is scratched. It will make a noise, and I cannot love you if you make that noise on purpose. On the back of the envelope, another hand, Ruth's, it would have to be her, wrote many years later, we did not love him less because he was my uncle, but we did not love him like we loved the person who kept the fuse where it belonged. You are going to ask, and you should, did Horace pull the fuse? A fuse screwed out is not a fuse pulled, exactly, but it feels like it. The sheriff's log says a fuse had been removed from the living room circuit the night of Aunt Aura's fall during the blackout drill. That was 43. The 1906 night has no column that says fuse gone, and the word that tried to replace it, belt, was too loud in the minds of everyone to see the quiet at the box. But there is a half story from Lyle, written in pencil nobody intended to read in court, 64 years later, when he was a man whose body had learned to declare itself on accident. Saw I tea in hum room alone that evening, he wrote in a shaky line. Belt not on at the time, HP comfortable, too comfortable. Asked if he needed me. He said he was helping. He was not. He looked at me like I had some secret and he hadn't thought up how to get it from me yet. Fingers black as if he had been in the box. Told him to hide marked fuse and use only in the event of a real short. She said she had the letter. I told her, hide the letter too. Are you thinking what I am? The marked fuse was a trick to keep the children from putting the wrong one in to solve the wrong problem. It was marked for the one that would trip too easily and make a noise in the night that sounded like failure. It wasn't to help. It was to warn. The person who put the mark there was practical. The person who used it was careful. The person who wanted it removed thought a candle was the answer to everything. He came in the storm. He put wax by the door and lies in his pocket and told himself God would fix what he broke. This is who he was, a man who took the belt and then the tie and then the fuse. He had three tools, knife, story, and pride. He could have been better. He chose not to. He died in 1922 of a thing that nobody named because they didn't want to say the words too much drink. His obituary said he worked in lumber. It did not say he was good at cutting the wrong things. I slept in the house that night with nothing on to see what the dark did here when given permission. I had a flashlight and did not intend to use it. I told myself I wanted to know. I also wanted to be brave. It is difficult to separate these two things. The house made small sounds the way bodies do when they are trying to go to sleep. A board expanded. The stove sighed. A drawer that had been pushed shut all day decided to be proud of not being quite shut, and made a sound it had kept to itself out of politeness before. I lay on the floor in the hall and looked up at the ceiling and remembered the two words I was told not to say here after midnight. Names. In the second hour, the house tapped my shoulder with something very old, a low hum you feel in your forearms before you hear it in your ear. I have been in rooms where this kind of sound makes your spine notice it's in your back. This was one of those. The hum came from the hum room because that's what hum rooms do. It was not the generator. They took its belt 3 owners ago and left the machine for memory. It was the shape of the room itself, the way the wind crawled under the door, and the old coil of wire still mounted on the wall made air into sound. It felt like a person whispering a letter, not a word. An M. My body wanted that to be a name. I did not give it one. I thought of 19 hertz. The frequency, some say, makes eyes see things in the corner. You can watch another viral video about that if you want. Nexpo doesn't do those frequencies the way some other channels do, but he does the fear of the corner well. A scientist back in the late 90s wrote about being terrified in a lab and then finding a fan blade making sound at a pitch that vibrated his eyeballs enough to paint a ghost for him. I told myself this, and it helped intelligently. It did not help emotionally. I still looked at the doorway and saw what I always see when I look at a doorway in the dark. The possibility of a person, the idea of a hat, the shape of fear if you sketch it with your hand in the air. The longer you lie in a room like that, the more your brain turns evidence into memory. The long shelf in the hum room is at the height of a shoulder. The coat thrown on the peg is thick. The narrow is only narrow because you know what the room looks like in daylight. At night, rooms grow wider in the corners and narrower in the middle. I felt my heart teach itself a new rhythm. The one it uses when you're ready to see something, but you tell yourself you won't. If you think that made me brave, it didn't. It made me honest. The fuse in my pocket felt like a secret you aren't supposed to hold too long. It felt hot, though it wasn't. At 2:30, when the sounds of the town were as absent as the light from your phone when you forget to plug it in, I stood up because lying down is sometimes an invitation. I put my hand on the wall where 100 other hands had been. I said out loud, chair, hand, other hand, my foot, other foot. I counted to 50. I liked that. It was the only religion I could practice there without disrespect. In the morning, nothing had smoked. I had no score to show you from the night's work. I had one new sentence for the ledger in my head. The house is not evil. It is thorough. Give it fear, and it will become a vessel for it. Give it rules, and it will hold them for you. Give it a man with a knife, and it will obediently let the belt be cut. Houses are moral in the way bowls are, only in what you put into them. There was one more letter I had not read because I didn't see it. It was in the wrapper of a bread tin with old receipts and a pencil worn down to a bit. It was for Ruth, who would order the house for the next season, for May, who knew she wasn't going to have much longer to say things that stuck. It said, take the fuse with the mark and carry it on your person. If someone asks you to show them the box in a storm, tell them no. If they insist, put your hand on theirs and say, this is our house. They will leave if they hear you. She signed it, me, and added a little circle like a sun. I took that page to the church the way you bring flowers to a grave. I read it into the wood. I wasn't alone. The caretaker sat 2 rows behind me because he wanted to see whether I talked to air. He met me on the steps and said, people who think this is a ghost story are lazy. We had a man with a knife here and a broken belt and a child who ran. We also had a family who did 90 right things in the dark, and we keep telling the 3 wrong things because that is what we like to do in the daytime. Tell the truth about the other 90. I will. Part 5. The last lamp and the warning in the frame. Ruth bought a lamp with a green glass shade the winter her mother died. She put it on the upstairs hall table because that was the one the house asked for. She cleaned it with vinegar. She did not let dust accumulate under it, because dust is not dirt. It is a story. She laid her hand on the shade sometimes just to feel the cold go. She taught her grandchildren to move in the dark with their hands out and their mouths used for counting, not calling names. Her husband laughed at her when he was young and then stopped when he got old and wise. He sat in the rocker in the hall like Merritt had and told the children the tales they wanted that had warmth and only a little fear in them. The good kind. The thrill that helps you practice for the real thing. In the ledger, her entries for those years become less divine and more pragmatic. They are grocery lists on the backs of rules. They are, sometimes, a catalog of small griefs and small joys. They are no longer the host of the house's panic. She refuses. That is how you survive a family story. You take your turn not believing so hard. She wrote one last letter the day she moved to the city, because the old house, too long in the same hands, becomes a trap, and she wanted her grandchildren to inherit only wisdom, not wood. It was taped to the inside of the kitchen cabinet door where the tin soldier used to sit. It said, "If the power fails, listen for each other's breathing. Do not say anyone's name. Names are hooks in the dark. Speak ordinary things. There is a chair. There is a wall. There is your hand. There is the doorframe. If someone says they see a person at the door, tell them what it is instead. Tell yourself what it is instead. If you are alone, hum the song about the ground where we walk. The dark does not know that song. It only knows our names." She signed it RML because she had stopped signing me the day Aunt Ora died, out of respect for the woman who had done 30 years as a raft for a house with a current in it. She carved 4 words into the frame of that kitchen door that you'll see if you stand where the light hits at 3 in the afternoon. "Leave one light ready," that's the title they gave the display, in the historical room now. To get to the carved part, the caretaker sanded lightly to raise the grain and reveal the lighter wood where a knife had kissed 100 years back. Ready, not on. Did you notice? Not leave one light burning. She knew better. Fires kill. Bulbs can fry. Wires can fail. Ready. Have the means. Have the ritual. Have the rules. There is a difference between a house lit and a house prepared. When the state came with money to buy the property to make a historical site, the grandson wrote a polite letter back that said, "We don't like being watched." He sold them the ledger instead. That is why I'm sitting with it. That is why you're hearing this. I did not find a ghost in the Everly house. I found fear's vest, and the way people hang it on hooks, where children can see so that they learn what it looks like and don't put it on accidentally. I found a man who cut a belt and tried to cut a family and failed because other people watched and remembered. I found a town that learned to black out windows when a whistle told them, because a whistle told them, and that same town later sent a woman a dish when the same kind of drill that taught them to be brave killed her sister. The last entry in the ledger has a cake recipe on it because the book ran out of paper at the same time a child ran out of patience for paper. On the back of it, somebody wrote a grocery list in pencil: salt, flour, kerosene, fuses. They wrote fuses twice by accident and only erased one. The eraser left a smudge. Under the smudge is the cross. You can see it with your fingernail better than your eye. Marked. Remembered. I kept the marked fuse in the archive box because you don't carry things like that home unless the house tells you to, and this one didn't. I took a copy of Ruth's warning with me, and I taped it inside my apartment's cabinet door like a man in a city can afford to do. The night the lights in my building died because a truck kissed a pole wrong, I read it to myself out loud and saw the outline of a hat and a coat. that was hanging on my chair and told myself the other truth. That is your coat. That is not a man. That is not a thing. The dark is doing what it does, and I am doing what I do. I hum the song about the ground where we walk because it is the only song I know all the words to. If you hear this and think this is about haunted houses, it isn't. It's about families who decide not to let the fear of a thing be the only thing they teach their children. It's about the difference between a lamp and a plan. It's about the way a town decides whether a man with a knife stands for the night or just for what he is, which is small. Before you go, tell me, if your power failed and your loved one started to say names at the door, what would you do first? Would you move to the hall? Would you count? Would you hum? I want to know which rule you'd borrow from the Everlys. One room, no names, or leave one light ready. And if you're drawn to stories like this, human mysteries that aren't solved by handcuffs so much as by listening to what fear sounds like when it breathes, stay with me. Like the video and subscribe to Sanctified Secrets. We keep the lights ready and tell the truth gently.